Hi YouTube, my name is Jack. Today we're going to talk about belief. I've tried recording this video once before and I got 12 minutes deep into a rant about Aristotelian hylomorphism that was not actually the point I was trying to make. So we're going to try this again without the philosophy. If you ever see me in person, come talk to me about Aristotelian hylomorphism. I have opinions. But we're going to talk about belief, and specifically belief in the context of Wicca. This is something I've touched on before, but in Wicca, people like to say that Wicca is an orthoprax religion rather than an orthodox religion. And what they mean by that is that in order to count as Wiccan, all you have to do is show up and do certain rituals in a certain way. Depending on how we're defining Wicca, those rituals might include certain rites of passage, like initiation into a certain tradition, or it might just mean like you show up and you cast a circle and you call quarters and like wham bam thank you man, you get to call yourself Wiccan. But there's a pervasive idea in Wicca that Wicca is defined by practice and not by belief. And if you're showing up to ritual, if you're doing the ritual and you're getting something out of it, that is enough for you to consider yourself Wiccan. And it doesn't really matter what you believe, as long as you're doing the ritual and you're finding enough value in it that it keeps you coming back. And that's a really valuable sentiment. I think there's a lot of good in the way that that's framed, but there's also something that's kind of off base about it, because of course Wiccans do generally have some shared beliefs. I've talked about this before. There are three big ones that are sort of assumed in Wiccan ritual. And it's not that they're required, you don't have to believe these things, but Wiccan ritual tends to be written with the assumption that the people performing the ritual hold these beliefs. And those beliefs are a belief in the existence of at least two deities, a belief in the efficacy of magic, which Wicca is a witchcraft religion, and reincarnation. Those are kind of the three things that we consistently see presupposed in Wiccan ritual. And that's not to say that you have to believe those things, but if you're doing Wiccan ritual, you're going to encounter liturgy that assumes that you are on that page. And if you're not, the onus is kind of on you to figure out whether and how you still get something out of the ritual. Now, funny thing here, I don't actually know how much I hold any of those three beliefs. And that's weird and interesting and troubling. And it's like, I do and I don't, right? Like if you press me on any of these three, I'll say yes, that I do believe in them, largely because largely because I do the ritual and I get so much value out of the ritual, and the ritual kind of holds these things in the background. And so I'm like, yeah, sure, these seem like kind of metaphysical commitments that in some way I need to get on board with in order for the ritual to make sense. And the ritual is important to me and I take value from it. So I'm gonna kind of adjust my worldview accordingly. We'll get into that more toward the end of the video, but like all three of these are actually really hard beliefs for me to reconcile. Some days it's easy, some days it's hard, but like all three of them are things that I come back to over and over and over. So today we're just going to talk through these three beliefs and where I land with all of them and how that affects my practice of Wicca. This is a very like first-person video. I don't know that this will be relevant to anyone else's experience, but I'm just gonna sit in front of the camera and talk. So here we go. First things first, the belief in multiple deities, I think really depends on how you define a deity. And I've talked about that a lot, right? I think a lot of people sort of define deities just as like a very powerful spirit. Like there are incorporeal spirits, and maybe down at the bottom we have kind of like earthbound elemental spirits, or like very small, like the soul of your espresso machine or whatever, if you have an animistic worldview. And then we go all the way up to the top, and whatever the really big, really powerful spirits are, we call those gods. I really struggle with the idea of incorporeal spirits. That's something that's really hard for me to wrap my head around. This is where attempt number 1 at the video took me into this long tirade about Aristotelian hylomorphism, because without going into any details, philosophically, my metaphysical commitments are broadly Aristotelian. 7 years of a PhD in Kant turned me into an Aristotelian. And one of the things that are really essential to Aristotelian metaphysics is this idea, has come to be known as hylomorphism, that form and matter go together, that they're inseparable from each other. And you can never have form without matter, you can never have matter without form. And that makes it very, very difficult to articulate a coherent belief in a spirit that does not have a body. Like, that's a very hard thing to formulate in an Aristotelian metaphysical framework. And it's not that I'm like, I have decided that I am an Aristotelian and therefore I must believe all of the things that Aristotle said. There's a lot that Aristotle got wrong, mostly having to do with women and enslaved people. Also, his geology is super interesting and is like the origin of a lot of alchemy in ways that seem really ridiculous now, but historically really fascinating to watch those wheels turn as people are trying to figure out how geology works. Regardless, not the conversation we're having right now. But the point is, like, I look at the world and I look at my understanding of how the world works, and the explanation that comes back to me over and over and over again is something like Aristotelian hylomorphism, which makes the belief in spirits really difficult. And that's funny because I belong to a religious tradition where we interact with incorporeal spirits a lot, not just with deities, but also with various other forms of ancestral spirits, or other spirits of the dead, with, elemental spirits. If you're doing that, there are Wiccans who are out here working with angels and demons and geniuses and, astrological spirits. And like, I inhabit a religious and magical milieu that is stacked to the brim with spirits. And that's hard sometimes, because I don't know how to articulate that in a way that makes sense to me. Now, it is also true that I have had a lot of first-person experiences in ritual that I can most easily describe as being interactions with spirits of one form or another, right? I've had interactions with deities, I've had interactions with ancestral spirits and other spirits of the dead, I've had interactions with elemental spirits. Like, I've run the gamut, and I've done a lot in a ritual context that the most straightforward explanation I have is that I was interacting with spirits in some way. But I also kind of don't believe in spirits. Well, no, that's not true. I do, but I don't. It's hard. It's hard for me to bring together my experiences in ritual with kind of my rational everyday self. Because I have the experiences in ritual, and they're intense, and they're powerful, and they keep me coming back for more. But also, they don't make sense to me. And there's a cognitive dissonance there that's very real. And I have never really known what to do with it, except that I get a lot out of the ritual, and so I keep coming back. And I keep having those experiences, and when I'm talking to other practitioners, I'm just going to relate the experiences directly without all of the hemming and hawing and the qualification and the I can't find a way to make this make rational sense, but yada, yada, yada. But the cognitive dissonance is there. So I've talked about before the way that I tend to interpret gods, largely as a way to ease this cognitive dissonance. This is a framework that really only works because I'm in Wicca. I think it doesn't really apply cleanly to most other religious frameworks, possibly any. I tend to think of a god as a mystery. I think of a god as a kind of experience, right? I think of a god as a transformative experience that is bigger than us, that permanently alters us in some way. And that experience exists independently of any individual person, right? It's not something that we're all making up, but we need language to express it. We need a way to kind of put ourselves in relationship with it and to understand it. And so we build up ritual and this sort of idea of theological reciprocity with this mystery that is bigger than us. And whatever is behind that mystery is the thing that we're calling a god, but the god is much bigger than any names that we give to it, or any stories that we tell about it, or any rituals that we do for it, etc. And that's something that I can understand what's going on when I put things in those terms. Still gets messy when we get to other kinds of spirits, but we're going to leave that for the time being and move on. The belief in at least two deities. The second one is the belief in the efficacy of magic. And y'all, I'm a bad witch. I do magic. I do magic consistently. And when I do magic, I get the results that I was doing the magic for. I don't have a perfect track record. My hit rate is probably about 7 out of 10. But 7 out of 10 really ain't bad. Again, don't have a perfect track record, but I do magic consistently, and I consistently get the results of the things that I'm doing magic for. And there are lots of ways that I can try to rationalize and work my way around that, and I can do the intellectual dance of trying to explain it all away. I don't really want to. I don't really feel a need to. I show up in ritual, I participate in ritual. Part of what the ritual involves doing magic. Wiccans do magic, guys. We're witches. And at the end of all of that, I get the results that I'm looking for. And I don't really need to chase that any further than it is. But at the same time, I have there is no part of magic that makes intellectual sense to me. It makes other kinds of sense to me. Absolutely, right? I think there's a really beautiful poetry to magic. I think I said in Tarot for the Magically Inclined that a spell is a song that we sing to the universe in the hope that the universe will be moved by its beauty and will give us what we want. And from a poetic point of view, from an artistic and symbolic point of view, it makes perfect sense to me that I light this candle and then I get a job. There's a lot of magic that makes sense to a lot of me, but the part of my brain that understands how mechanistic physics works just cannot get on board with magic. Never could, possibly never will. It doesn't matter. I show up and I do the magic anyway. And when I'm doing magic, I'm not stopping myself in the middle of a spell and being like, well, I don't really think that this is probably a very scientifically plausible way of trying to achieve. No, I'm not doing any of that. But, I show up, I do the magic, the results happen, whether we want to do magical thinking and ascribe a causal connection there, or whether we just want to say that, I happen to be very lucky and I'm selecting magical targets for things that I'm likely to get anyway. There are lots of explanations. Doesn't really matter. I'm doing it anyway, and I'm invested in it anyway. And I think the investment is really crucial. Rather than, say, belief, doing the magic and doing it without reservations and doing it without stopping yourself and saying, hey, this is kind of silly, that matters more. But, magic is a big bullet to bite, you guys. Again, these are the metaphysical commitments that I'm working with. Ain't no magic going on in here. Aristotle famously does not believe in magic. Also really strongly against divination in really, really fascinating ways. His book on dreams is a really interesting ancient rebuttal of practices of divination. Getting sidetracked again, and I apologize for that. So we have a belief in at least two deities. We have a belief in the efficacy of magic. And then the third one, with symbolism that's just all throughout Wicca, is a belief in reincarnation. And I think of the three, this is the one that you get the most pushback on in Wiccan communities. You get a lot of people who are very okay with multiple deities, who are very okay with magic, but who balk at the idea of reincarnation. For any of a variety of reasons, right? No one knows what happens after we die. Anyone who claims to know is selling something. But if nothing else, the symbolism of death and resurrection is constant in Wicca. It's everywhere. And certainly we know that early Wiccans like Gardner believed in a one-to-one type of reincarnation where, like, you die, and then your individual soul survives and goes to the afterlife, hangs out for a while, and then that individual soul comes back and it's the same person. And again, it's a big bullet to bite. It's a big commitment. Partly, again, because of the whole Aristotelian hylomorphism thing, it's very hard for me to conceive of a soul existing independently of a body. Like, I don't know what that looks like. That doesn't make sense to me. Hi, sweetie. Oh, there you are. Oh, you're such a good girl. You're being so good this time, not like the last time we filmed a video. No. Like, I don't know what it looks like for a soul to exist independently of a body. So the idea that the same soul can be in this body that I'm in right now, and then I die and the soul separates from the body and goes somewhere else and hangs out and then comes back to a new body, but it's the same soul. I don't know what to do with that. That doesn't make sense to me. Hey! We were being good, and then we stopped being good, and we started walking on the keyboard. And that's okay, because we were just curious. We were just curious. But then also just, like, given everything that we know currently about the way that who you are is affected by your brain chemistry, by your genetics, by the circumstances of your upbringing, given all of that and all of those things that come together to produce the person that you are, I don't know what's left over for a soul, right? I don't know what the through line could be such that you have someone who, hi, yes. Oh, are we going to walk on the keyboard again? Are we going to walk on the keyboard again, sweetie? Oh, that's so exciting. Oh, we're going to move. We're going to move the keyboard. Okay. If you take away the brain chemistry, and you take away the genetics, and you take away the upbringing, you take away all of these kind of factors in the here and now that contribute to a person being who they are, what is the thing that's left over that is able to survive and be transferred into another body for reincarnation? And I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. I have not seen a compelling answer to that. And I struggle with it. I really struggle with it. Now, at the same time, same as with the gods, same as with the magic, I've had ritual experiences that I can only describe in terms of reincarnation. And I don't really know what to do with that. It doesn't square with my, rational brain, but, like, the experiences are there, and I have to make something of them. I did, years ago at this point, I did a very long and sort of, hi, sweetie, what are we doing here? I did a very long and involved series of oracular rituals that ended up providing me with a name and a little bit of biographical information about the person who supposedly was my previous incarnation. Okay, let's come over here. There we go. And so I did this long series of oracular rituals. I got a name, I got some biographical information, and then I went and looked it up. And yeah, that person actually existed. Died in California in 1995, which, a little bit of context, I was born in 1996. But, like, I did this intense divinatory magical series of rituals. They provided me with information, and then that information was, well, not necessarily confirmed, it was corroborated by research that I went and did and, like, looked at archival stuff about, who this person might have been. So, I don't fucking know. Insofar as anything can be considered evidence in favor of reincarnation, that seems like the best evidence there's ever gonna be. But I have no clue how that would work. It's tough. It's really tough. The way that I think about it a lot is I think about people's lives in terms of patterns. And I think that there's a way in which, like, if you were reading a modernist novel, right? And one chapter of the modernist novel was the life of that person. And then you turn the page and the next chapter is Jack Chanek's life. I think there's a way that you could find a meaningful through line, that there's a narrative that's constructed from one life to the next that these things sort of follow on from each other. That my life in some way looks like it's picking up where someone else has left off. That's the closest I can come to an account of reincarnation that makes sense to me. And it's not super satisfying, but I don't know that anything's going to be, at least not satisfying to me, right? There are a lot of people who go for the more abstract, like, well, when I die, my body will decompose and the atoms that make up my body will be returned to the universe and eventually something else will be made from those atoms. And that's beautiful. That's just like, that's too far off from reincarnation to really satisfy me. Like, it's a beautiful, beautiful imagery of like death and rebirth, and it's all very abstract and glorious, but it's not reincarnation. You know what I mean? So, again, like, do I have a satisfying account of reincarnation? No. Do I believe in reincarnation? Kinda, yeah. Because, again, like, I don't just believe in reincarnation. I believe very specifically that reincarnation is real, and I know the name and, like, its biography of a specific person who I think was my past incarnation. I don't share that name and biography because it's totally impossible to confirm, and that's just, like, I hate the people who go around being like, oh yes, I was Cleopatra in a past life. I was not Cleopatra in a past life, to be clear. Like, this name I got, this person, was an ordinary person. I wasn't like a Kennedy or something. I wouldn't want to be a Kennedy these days, but you know what I mean. But I think consistently the thread is, in Wiccan ritual, I have these intense and moving experiences, these transformative experiences that keep me coming back. And the most straightforward way for me to communicate these experiences, for me to understand and engage with these experiences, is to say that I've had experiences with the gods, that I've had experiences with magic, that I've had experiences with reincarnation. But when I'm not in a ritual context, and when I'm trying to just sit down and be a philosopher, because ultimately that's what I am, when I'm trying to put it together in a way that is rational and makes sense, I can't. I can't make any of those things make sense. And so I am stuck in this delightful limbo where I hold a lot of beliefs that I also cannot defend. And I don't like describing those as matters of faith, because they're not faith, they're experiential, right? Those are beliefs that I've formed based on anecdotal experience. But I don't think that my experience is a sufficient basis for anyone else to hold those beliefs, right? The fact that I have cast spells and gotten the results that I want and had the kinds of experiences I've had with magic justifies my belief in magic in a sense, even if I can't make it rationally coherent. It does not justify anyone else believing in magic. I don't know how much sense that makes, but I hope you get what I'm saying. That, like, I've formed beliefs because in a ritual context, I've had experiences over and over again, and the only way for me to really process those experiences is through these beliefs, through these assertions. But for other people who aren't trying to process those experiences, there's no reason that my experiences should be the basis of them holding those same beliefs. And indeed, when I try to step back and take a third-person point of view, I don't see a really coherent and sensible way for someone to hold these three beliefs. I just know that I do, and I kind of have to, because it's the only way that I can account for the experiences that I've had. Shit's messy, man. Anyways, that is all that I have for today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being such a good girl this time. Yeah, you were so good. And I will catch you sometime soon. Bye.